Well, we'll get started here. I want to thank you for coming today. My name's John Tricano, and I guess I'm still the president of InvestStar, which still continues to exist for a period of time here anyway. I'm also director of Sienna Technologies. What I want to do today was just give you a little background on how we ended up here today, and then I'll turn it over to the company management to give you the story of Sienna Technologies. Basically, InvestStar, as you probably know, was a blind pool that was formed about 2 years ago by a guy by the name of Frank Sherman. And Frank approached me just about 2 years ago at this time to ask whether I'd be an investor and a director in InvestStar, which was a blind pool that Frank was forming, and I indicated to him that I would. So we put some investors together and formed a blind pool, and in the spring of 1989, Van Clemens took the company public. I think the offering was finally concluded in about June of '89. Well, in the meantime, unfortunately, Frank became sick and passed away in the spring of 1990. But when he became sick, the board of directors, probably because I didn't have anything to do at the time, elected me the president of InvestStar and gave me the responsibility to go out and find an operating company for us to merge with. We had a very small blind pool. We had about $330,000 in it, so we had to be very careful with what we did with the money because, like I say, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and we wanted to make sure we found the right situation. So we had a board meeting probably right after we concluded the public offering, and we came up with basically 4 criteria that we wanted a company to meet that we would merge with. One was that it be a non-startup. Number 2, that it be profitable. Number 3, that had very little, if any, debt. And number 4, it would be a type of company that $300,000 would significantly benefit its operations. So with those criteria in mind, I went out and probably over the next 7 or 8 months, I looked at about 60 companies, and a lot of them didn't meet anywhere near the criteria, so we threw those away. And then in January of 1990, I called Peter Erdman, who I'd known from before, and just asked him how things were going. He indicated they were doing pretty well, so I went over and talked to him. And basically that process from January through about May was our due diligence process on Sienna Technologies. And in May we entered into a letter of intent to merge with Sienna, and then through an extended period over the summer we finally concluded the legal document and finally merged in late September. I think basically, as I said, the merger and the marriage, I think, of the 2 companies makes a lot of sense, and I won't go into all the details here, but suffice it to say that we are very pleased with what we've seen at Sienna so far and what we look for in the future. And we'll be having a shareholder meeting in the not too distant future where the shareholders of InvestStar will get their first real glimpse of what Sienna does, and hopefully they'll agree with me that it was a good merger for InvestStar. With that, I'll turn it over to Peter Erdman, the president of Sienna Technologies, and he'll begin the process of telling you a little bit about what Sienna does. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I would like to share with each of you a brief overview of Sienna Technologies, which will then be expanded upon by my colleagues Brian Root and Ed Ropp, who will elaborate on our products, the technology, and the marketplace. Sienna Technologies is in the business of producing capital test equipment and software in an integrated package to enable semiconductor manufacturers and computer chip end users to assess, forecast, and control the reliability of their products. Reliability is the key word in that sentence. Our equipment and services are used to test semiconductors for reliability. Every manufacturer of semiconductors tests their devices to see if they work or not. If they do work, of course they may ship them. If they don't, they either have to scrap them or rework them such that they do work. It is important to note that even when they do ship their products, they only know that they function at that time and place. They don't know how long they will work. As technology progresses, industry finds it increasingly important to know how long the device works. Mr. Root and Mr. Ropp in a few moments will explain in detail why industry is placing such significance on this. While there are numerous suppliers of functional test equipment around the country, Sienna is the world supplier and industry expert of reliability test equipment. In 1987, Brian Root and I were working for Unisys here in the Twin Cities. We were both in an advanced device engineering group. Brian was a device engineer, I was in the design area. Brian was, and still is, quite active with several international reliability physics organizations. The focus of these groups was to examine and understand the mechanisms behind semiconductor failures and to minimize those effects. Part of Brian's responsibilities at Unisys was to assess the reliability of the devices being produced there. Having attended these conferences for a number of years, Brian was well aware that the type of equipment that he needed to perform the type of reliability testing that they needed at Unisys was not available commercially. So he constructed his own. Most of his colleagues were either hacking something together or resorting to constructing their own system, much as Brian was doing at the time. It was obvious to Brian that a commercially available product that could do the types of testing that these engineers required would be well received by his colleagues. Brian and I thought that our synergistic skills could capitalize on this emerging opportunity. We initially just set out that year to produce two sets of equipment. However, we found later that it was evident that a large market was in the marketplace for that type of equipment. During this time, Unisys was in the process of shutting down our division and would be laying off virtually everyone. It was to both Unisys's and our advantage to start a company and hire a few of the people away that would ordinarily be laid off. As a consequence, we obtained complete release from Unisys of any intellectual property that might be interpreted to have come from them. In the first part of 1988, we secured funding from 4 private investors and founded Sienna Technologies. In seeking that funding, we specifically looked for people who could function as partners in the deal. Our goal was to aggressively capitalize on the opportunity, but from a conservative financial perspective. We didn't want to hire hundreds of people and shoot for monumental short-term gains. We wanted to build a solid company that provided excellent customer satisfaction, quality products, committed employment, technology leadership, and long-term profits. Finding money for some new product is tough enough, but finding the right type of money was and still is a major challenge. I believe that this funding source that we originally found was instrumental to our present success. The merger with Investar that John just talked about withstood the same scrutiny as our original investors, and from a partner standpoint, I firmly believe today that it's been an excellent union. The Sienna organization structure today is really an extension of the original spirit that founded Sienna. We have assembled a cadre of technical experts who function best in a collegial environment which as a group establishes priorities. In the same spirit, the management team is comprised of 3 individuals, Ed Ropp, Brian Root, and myself, who specialize in our own particular areas of expertise, but work as one, guiding the company. All associates, then, work with each of us depending on the nature of their task. Each person is encouraged to assume responsibility over his or her area, with management acting as support for their activities. Specifically, then, management is segmented as follows. Mr. Root is Executive Vice President and co-founder. He is primarily responsible for the technology leadership, product direction, and research and development back at Sienna. He remains very active in the scientific community, identifying the needs of the marketplace and putting those ideas into products back at Sienna. Mr. Ropp is Vice President of Sales and Marketing. He focuses his time on developing marketing strategies, planning new product entry, and directing an international network of sales representatives. In addition, Ed has brought a great deal of academic and practical expertise to the company. As president and co-founder of Sienna, I am responsible for the finance and asset management, manufacturing, and day-to-day operations back at Sienna. Sienna has always had a practical, frugal way of viewing business. Time and time again, Brian and I were told during our initial funding search that the only way to get such a large enterprise off the ground would be to raise millions of dollars and hire dozens and dozens of people. From day one, Sienna has been aggressively conservative in attaining its goals. We believe that bootstrap financing and focused resources can affect results just as impressive, if not more so, than those millions of dollars could have done. By a strong commitment to controlled growth, we were and still are able to grow at an economically practical rate. Each associate that has joined Sienna over the past 2 years has been a major commitment to the company. We view each one as a partner in business. Our associates today tell me that they really feel that they have a bottom line effect on customer satisfaction and overall company performance. One thing that Sienna has always done is to visioneer towards the future. Our systems and controls today have positioned us for rapid growth in the few years to come. We expect there to be fewer growth problems with overhead operations and resources that typical startup companies experience in their growth curve. These systems and controls don't always even mean much of an investment in people, facilities, and equipment, but rather a well thought out plan that will support significant growth. Today, an example of that is our computer integrated manufacturing system that ties our manufacturing, sales, purchasing, accounting, inventory, and engineering controls all together in a unified, integrated manner. Efforts such as this poise Sienna to grow and change with market forces quicker than other companies who must fall back and regroup whenever the market changes. Our goals at Sienna are really quite simple, but we rigorously pursue them. First, we want to be a technology leader. And just 3 years into business today, we are the international benchmark by which our customers and even our competition judge other products. We want happy customers. Our repeat business today is already a major portion of our revenue stream. And we realize that our product quality must be paramount. After all, that is the very industry that we are servicing. We want to treat our employees and suppliers as partners. We firmly believe that we are all partners in business together. And finally, we believe that we are very fiscally responsible to all the stakeholders of Sienna. In a world where quarterly earnings tend to dominate even common sense, and profits are unheard of in the first years of technology startups, Sienna has functioned with an eye towards long-term viability while achieving significant profits along the way. In 1987, our first product entries generated revenues of approximately $38,000 with earnings of $4,000. Our capitalization at that time was a mere $3,000. But it's important to realize that that year we were operating out of the two founders' homes. In 1988 was our first year of operation as Sienna Technologies. Development of an enhanced product line was intensely underway and resulted in product shipments in the fourth quarter. Revenues for 1988 were $180,000 with a net loss of only $58,000. Capitalization was $71,000. 1989, our first full year of production, saw revenues of $1.8 million with earnings of $180,000. Capital remained steady, however, we secured both long and short-term borrowings during the course of that year. This year, sales are slightly up from last year and should produce earnings of approximately $70,000. Now, while 1990 figures may not be terribly exciting at first blush, it is important to realize that suppliers to the semiconductor industry ride on a very cyclical economy. Most mature manufacturers of semiconductor test equipment have experienced a significant downturn in the market this past year. It is important to note that for a relatively new company to maintain nearly steady revenue and profits during a large industry downturn clearly demonstrates the great need for our products and industry's sense of urgency in allocating funds for our equipment. The merger of Sienna Technologies and InvestStar will now better enable us to achieve the long-term goals that we have been working towards. We have a stronger capital structure so we can confidently fund research and development at 15 to 20% of sales and have the necessary reserves to persevere through the cyclical economy. As a public company, Sienna now has an excellent vehicle to attract and retain key staff members through stock options as well as provide liquidity to our present investors. A major key to our success is knowing where this market niche is at all times and what it requires from its suppliers. Technology will be forever changing. Long-term viability in this market requires a supplier to be intimately tied and responsive to that ever-changing scientific community. We firmly believe that Sienna Technologies is poised as such a world-class supplier. And now I'd like to introduce to you Brian Root, co-founder and vice president, who will be talking about the technology behind our products.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you about the technology of our product, why the need for this technology is growing, and what we are doing to meet this need. Interestingly enough, what most people don't realize is that semiconductor devices do wear out. Some people may ask, does that really matter? If the device stops working in a couple of years, won't it be obsolete anyway? To answer that, let's ask the question, what is reliability? I think we all know what reliability feels like. If you were taking a trip across the country, which car would you feel better about using? A Honda or a Yugo? Is that important to you? You bet it is. This is a direct analogy to a semiconductor device. If you can buy the same device from two different manufacturers, but one can demonstrate the reliability of the devices and show you data from the very devices you plan to buy, which vendor would you pick? Sienna Technologies Systems gives the manufacturer the capability to get that reliability data. So why is this so new? Well, let's take a very quick tour through the history of semiconductor devices. When the IBM PC was first designed and introduced in the 1980s, it was a relatively simple machine. 64K of dynamic RAM, a very slow 8-bit microprocessor. Now 10 years later, we have the 8486 and Intel's i860. Motorola has a new processor, the 68040. They have more than 1 million transistors on a chip, running at up to 50 megahertz. In fact, Hewlett-Packard just recently reported on a processor that they have actually running at 90 megahertz. We have large capacity hard drives now. We have sophisticated color graphics. These are now very, very complex systems with very, very little room to make mistakes when you build them. To demonstrate this, let's run through some very simple math to show you what I mean. Let's say there's a computer chip with 100 transistors on it. Then let's say that there is a fabrication line. We usually call those fab lines, where it is produced. Let's say one out of every 1,000 transistors that they fabricate will die early due to a reliability failure mechanism. That means that 1 out of every 10 computer chips would fail early, but 9 would be just fine. So they just develop a screen to screen out that one that would be bad. But most importantly, if this fab line ever tried to build a chip with 10,000 transistors on it, that chip would never be reliable. The Sienna Technologies systems give that manufacturer a way to improve the reliability of their process. What does this mean? As devices get more and more complex, the reliability of those devices must be known with an increasing level of precision and accuracy. The only conclusion that you can reach from this is that life testing is becoming obsolete. Life testing is the old way to test for reliability. It involves testing hundreds and thousands of parts at high temperatures and voltages for 1,000 to 2,000 hours in an attempt to accelerate the failure mechanisms. If you have an 8486 running at 50 megahertz, how are you going to test several thousand of those parts for 2,000 hours? That is going to cost big bucks. But there is something that's even more important than that. What if after 1,000 hours, the manufacturer finds a problem? The devices are failing early. all of the devices that have been manufactured in the last 1,000 hours, which, by the way, is approximately 6 weeks, must be scrapped. Worse yet, the manufacturer must call the customers and recall the parts. How would you feel if you had already soldered the part into a board and sent it to your customer? Believe it or not, this has happened to every single semiconductor manufacturer and has cost them tens of millions of dollars. So, what is the alternative? Well, Sienna to the rescue. The manufacturer tests for the specific mechanism, the specific reliability mechanism, tests at the wafer level, and ties the reliability testing for the first time to the manufacturing process control. Now you may ask, well, what are these specific mechanisms? Well, there's electromigration. We've been selling systems to do that since 1988. We are very close to introducing modules to perform time-dependent dielectric breakdown. We usually say TDDB, try to say that several times fast. And hot carriers. And there are a lot more that we can pursue in the near and distant future. I'll bet you didn't know that there are so many things that could go wrong with a semiconductor device. So why test? Essentially at the wafer level. Mainly because it saves time and it saves money. Packaging costs money. And most of it is done now in Malaysia and Thailand. It can take weeks to get parts packaged. In the meantime, the fab is literally driving blind. Doing wafer level reliability testing allows the manufacturer to move it directly into the fab line. That way no bad products ever leave the fab and none of the bad stuff gets to the customer. Perhaps the biggest benefit to the manufacturer is now for the first time they can tie the reliability testing to their process control. They can track it and they can adjust it as needed. They are no longer driving blind. They can report the data to their customer, which for them is a very significant competitive advantage. I guess you do have to ask the question, does anybody really care? Well, yes, the Defense Department cares very much. And DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, has really led the charge in this over the last 10 years. They have new standards requiring this type of testing that I'm talking about. And we have had a part in writing those standards. And now these standards are moving to the commercial side. And once again, we are directing the Standards Committee. So I guess you have to ask, is it a miracle that your computer on your desk works at all? I'll say sometimes yes up on the slide. I'll expand on that by saying, well, it depends upon who manufactured your semiconductor devices. How do the semiconductor manufacturers make sure and put whatever you want to in there? Your radio, your VCR, your car, your furnace, your computer, your garage door opener, your microwave, your pacemaker, the airplane you fly on, your television, your telephone, and we could go on and on and on. Will it work next year? I think you want it to. A simple way to do it is by using Sienna Technologies systems. The ITS 810 is our original product. It does only electromigration testing, and it does those fast reliability tests for electromigration. It does it in the fab line, the fabrication line. The ITS 8000 is a larger modular system that does many, many different tests and can be easily upgraded and expanded, and I underline upgraded and expanded, with both hardware and software. You undoubtedly want to know what is in our future, the famous black box, or should I say gray box. We have a very clearly defined technical path with new tests and application modules that plug into the ITS 8000 and new software for both of the systems. Those can take us for many, many years. And now I'd like to turn this over to Ed, and he can talk to you about our market opportunities. Ed?
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to pick up where Brian left off and move the emphasis from the technology to the marketplace. In the next few minutes, I'll address 4 questions. First, does the market need what Sienna has to sell? Second, what success has Sienna had to date in selling its products? And third, what opportunities and threats are facing Sienna in the marketplace today? Then finally, what does the future look like for Sienna Technologies in its markets? Does the market need what Sienna has to sell? Well, let me put it another way. As an alumnus of both the 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Divisions, which are deployed right now in the Middle East, does the United States and the Allied military force deployed there need weapon systems that will work in the heat of the Saudi Arabian desert? And what would happen if those systems were to fail? Well, closer to home, do our classrooms need learning stations that can survive more than one semester of typical student use? And are consumers demanding electronic products that will work and will keep on working year after year? Is there a market? Yes, and there will continue to be a market for Sienna products just so long as there's a need for reliable semiconductor components. And semiconductor reliability is Sienna's business. What success has Sienna had in selling its products? Let's break that question into 3 parts. First, who's been buying integrated test stations from Sienna? Second, what precisely are they buying? And third, why are they buying? Now, this slide shows our installed base of systems in the United States. The largest semiconductor manufacturing firms across the country, from coast to coast, have been buying Sienna systems. These include captive fabs, fabrication facilities, that make chips only for their parent organizations, as well as merchant fabs, who make chips for other companies. Our current list of users includes such names as Advanced Micro Devices, Hewlett-Packard, and Intel in Silicon Valley on the West Coast, AT&T Bell Labs, Digital Equipment Corporation, IBM on the East Coast, Northern Telecom in Ottawa, Canada, and many others. Semiconductor manufacturers overseas are also buying Sienna systems, from old-line European firms to Japan and the little tigers of the Pacific Rim. Our current list of international users includes such firms as Chartered Semiconductor in Singapore, Fujitsu, Hitachi, Mitsubishi, and others in Japan, Hyundai, Samsung in Korea, Philips in the Netherlands, Siemens in Germany, and others. I might mention that many of our users, both in North America and overseas, have come back for additional systems as well as for expansions and upgrades to their current systems. And as Peter said earlier, repeat business is a good source of revenue for Sienna, as well as a sign of a high level of customer satisfaction. Within these companies, who is it who specifies, recommends, and champions Sienna's systems? First, we have the hardcore researchers, many of whom have PhDs in electrical engineering, physics, or materials science. They're doing basic research on the behavior of metals under stress. Next, we have the engineers and scientists in the corporate reliability groups who are charged with determining how changes in the design of a device, changes in the materials used for the device, and changes in the processing of the device might improve the reliability of the chip when it's finally packaged, integrated into assemblies, and used by the ultimate consumer. Then we have the quality assurance and failure analysis people who deal with such techniques as statistical process control and who find that Sienna systems provide fast, accurate, and useful data for their work. In the fabs, the semiconductor fabrication facilities, it's the process engineers who buy Sienna systems for their fast tests, evaluating whole batches of wafers at a time. But at the end of the day, it's top management that must approve the capital equipment requests. But we have also had instances where top executives returning from meetings with parent companies have directed that their plants acquire Sienna systems to meet the higher standards expected of them. In those cases, I might add, the approval process seems to go very quickly and very smoothly. Well, what precisely are they buying? Some are buying the smaller tabletop ITS 810 for wafer level reliability fast tests at an average selling price of $32,000. Others are buying the ITS 8000 with its larger capacity and wider variety of testing features for an average selling price of $145,000. And those who do buy the ITS 8000 come back for add-ons and upgrades for more capacity and more flexibility. One such order recently came in with a selling price of $65,000 for an add-on. And finally, we have also accepted on an opportunistic basis service contracts from people who do not now have a system, but nevertheless need the results of the kind of tests that our systems perform. And we do those tests in our own labs back at Sienna Technologies. Why are they buying? They are buying because they must buy. And there are two powerful reasons. First, there's what we might call the technological imperative, and second, what we could call the economic imperative. The technological imperative arises from the demand for smaller and smaller products. Business Tokyo magazine recently projected that by 1994, we'll have ultra-thin portable television sets. That by the year 2000, we'll have portable health sensors to alert us to potential physical abnormalities. And that in just about a dozen years from now, we'll have implantable artificial ears. And all of these products will require extremely small, extremely reliable semiconductor circuits. As time goes on, the sizes of semiconductor circuits will continue to decrease. In 1970, there were roughly 2,000 devices on a PC chip. By 1980, the number had grown to 29,000. Today, as Brian indicated earlier, the number is about 1.2 million. And by the end of this decade, there will be as many as 100 million devices on a semiconductor chip. This is a growth of 50,000 times in 20 years. As the density of devices on a chip increases, the size of each device decreases. At a recent technical conference in Silicon Valley, one paper indicated that while the minimum feature size in 1990 is about 0.6 microns, by 1993 it will be just 0.4 of a micron. And as the size of each device decreases, the number of potential failures increases. Chip manufacturers know this, and they are buying Sienna systems to test the reliability of their devices. The economic imperative arises from the increasing concern of consumers for products that will last, that will not break down soon after purchase. For example, the October 22nd, 1990 issue of Business Week, last week, reports that in a recent Harris poll, when people were asked about the relative importance of several factors when shopping for a new car, some 96% said that reliability was very important, compared to 75% for price and only 41% for styling. Buyers want reliable products. And the nation's largest buyer, the United States government, has just gone on record, as Brian indicated, with a mill standard, to require that any semiconductor manufacturer who wants to sell to the federal government must adhere to the standards of this new mill spec. Such firms must adopt standard tests, specifically those tests that Brian mentioned earlier, performed by Sienna's integrated test stations, in order to be considered to be on the government's Qualified Manufacturers Listing, or QML. The importance of these new standards goes far beyond the military. Commercial firms also use the mill spec as a de facto standard. That is, if you can't qualify for sale to the government, then you can't qualify for sale to my company. When you say that to a manufacturer who has $250 million invested in plant and equipment and can't sell the product of that plant, you get that manufacturer's attention real quick. The mil-spec is now being used as the model for an international standard. So any firm who wants to sell semiconductor products anywhere in the world, in the United States or overseas, must perform the standard tests either on a Sienna system or on some similar system. And what are those similar systems? We classify our competitive threat into three groups. The first is BYOB, what we call build your own box. Before Sienna appeared on the scene, that was the only way to go. So there are a number of those kinds of home-built systems in the field. Now these are non-standard processes, and many of their users recognize that they must be replaced or at least augmented. There is, however, a misconception that such arrangements are less expensive to make than to buy. And it's this kind of reasoning that we're trying to set straight. For example, by getting their proponents to acknowledge the opportunity costs of the engineers who have to build and maintain these home-built setups. The second is what we call rack and stack. People buy a piece of instrumentation, such as a parametric tester, slap a little software on it, and start using it for testing. It may be cheap, and it may meet minimum demands, but again, tests in this mode are not performed using the industry standard, and the plants using them are in jeopardy of being excluded under the QML. The third source of competition is the integrated systems manufacturer. We are an integrated systems manufacturer, but we're not aware of any such firms operating in the United States, although we've heard that there are some possibilities of startups in Japan, although we have not lost any business to any of those firms. Our response to these firms, and to any others who might want to start crowding into our market niche, is to be out there first with the greatest value in terms of industry standards, functionality, flexibility, and what we call the Sienna difference. Sienna's commitment to complete support for our users, from the design of experiments and test structures to high-value test stations such as the ITS 810 and ITS 8000, with full hardware and software support, to tools for data analysis, to consulting and services. An example of our commitment to support is the users group, STAR, which stands for the Sienna Technologies Association of Researchers. We provide a user-oriented newsletter with up-to-date technical information and tips on how to get the most from the system. No other commercial supplier in our market provides this kind of networking support. So we believe STAR affords Sienna a significant competitive advantage. Now, the opportunities for Sienna derive from the needs of the semiconductor industry, and the opportunities for the semiconductor industry derive from a growing number of industries, everything from aerospace, telecommunications, consumer electronics, automotive, computers, and defense. But we believe that we will be somewhat resistant to any but the most severe economic downturn. For when some of these driving industries are down, others are up. I might add, parenthetically, the same thing applies to our geographic diversity, that when one part of the world may be down, another part of the world may be up. Now, in addition, as the provider of technologies that will help semiconductor manufacturers to improve their competitive position in good times and bad, we believe that our growth will continue even when the industry as a whole slows down. And I think you can see that from the financials that Peter showed over the past 2 years, when the semiconductor industry has been in a bit of a slump. Happily, however, the semiconductor industry is not facing a downturn, but a recovery from 2 slump years. DataQuest, as reported in the Wall Street Journal, albeit before the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, forecasted a growth of U.S. semiconductor industry sales of 16% next year, followed by even more rapid growth in the following 2 years. And an even more robust recovery is forecasted for the semiconductor industry in Japan and the other countries on the Pacific Rim. The opportunities are out there for Sienna, but we must go after those opportunities aggressively. Toward that end, we have built a network of sales representatives across the United States, in Asia, in Europe, and the rest of the world where we have market potential. Our coverage of the United States is nearly complete, and we have excellent representatives in the high-density areas of the Northeast, South, and West. There are only a few open accounts in the Midwest where we sell direct. In the Pacific Rim, we have excellent representatives in each of the markets where semiconductor fabs are located, especially in Japan, Korea, and Singapore. In Western Europe, as in Asia, our representatives do not only sales but service as well. And in Eastern Europe, we're just beginning to explore the Soviet market, where we know there are a large number of semiconductor fabs as well as research and development facilities. We have representatives in Canada, in Israel, India, Australia. Now, as with all of our representatives, they work strictly on a commission basis. What does the future look like for Sienna Technologies? I'd like to conclude with just this brief summary of what we see in our future. First, the market trends that we've discussed will not only continue, but will accelerate. Semiconductor devices will get smaller and smaller, increasing their susceptibility to the kinds of failure for which Sienna test stations are designed. Second, our modular approach will continue to allow Sienna to be there to meet new markets' needs quickly and economically. And third, we will continue to grow into our natural market, which is a global market for semiconductor reliability testing technologies. Now, even as we're meeting here this afternoon, the Ulysses space traveler is beginning a voyage of 5 years and 93 million miles to the sun. Now, whether Ulysses completes its mission will depend largely on whether the semiconductor components in its navigational and telecommunication subsystems were built for long-term reliability. That's why we're here, and that's Sienna's business. Now I'd like to turn the program back to John Turcano for closing remarks.
Thank you. I don't have much more to say. I think the guys are here available to answer questions for you. As I said, we're excited, as the Investar management and shareholders to have them, have this merger completed and be on board with Sienna. And I hope you are excited as well and can get that word out to your clients, as stockbrokers. Again, we'll be having a shareholders meeting at some future date, and I hope to see you back for that. And the guys will be here to answer questions for you for a brief period hereafter. Thank you.